We say things like, maybe later, perhaps another time, or I'll see you tomorrow. But for some of us, there won't be a tomorrow. Listen as your worst nightmares come to life. These nightmares have become someone's reality. My name is Justin Crowley, and this is The Murder Project. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 37 of The Murder Project. It is so good to be back with you guys. We had a little bit of a break over the holidays, rolled in by some other things that came up, work schedules, sicknesses, all the regular, usual stuff that's going on right now. I guess it's just part of it. But either way, we are back. We are glad to be back. And slap my daddy's back, we got a banger for you. This one's a good one. We've been holding on to this one since we started the Murder Project. We've been talking about this one since before we started the Murder Project and wanting to do it. So this is going to be a multi-episode as usual, but it's probably going to be 2 or 3 or possibly 4 episodes because it is a good one. Which one am I talking about? It is the case of Thomas Kelly Brown, also known as Tom Brown. And this one is I put more into this one as far as research goes than I have any other case because it is so important to me because it is so complex in the way that it could go. But we'll talk about that in the episode and the upcoming episodes. So without further ado, strap in, ladies and gentlemen. Episode 37 starts right now. I think it's important in this case that we start out talking about it the way that the case unfolded in the beginning. Because, as I mentioned earlier, this has been a long-running case as far as the information goes. It started back in 2016, and it is still continuing as we speak. New evidence seems to come out every now and then. Sometimes we get information that we didn't have previously. We get new investigators or different divisions of investigators or what have you. But as far as this case is concerned, it is still ongoing. So the information can update in real time or after the episode has posted. We'll be sure and update you guys if it does. But we are going to be talking about a small town in the Texas Panhandle. It's called Canadian, Texas, and it is up in the northeast part of the Panhandle, going towards the Panhandle of Oklahoma as well. And so it is in the county of Hemp-Hill. And so this particular area is a sort of a farming, ranching, and oil field community. I used to go through there all the time when I worked in the oil field, and I spent a lot of time in the Canadian area, as well as I have some friends that are from that area, so I am familiar with the area that we are going to be talking about and the locations that we are going to be talking about. This story, as I mentioned in the intro, is about Thomas Kelly Brown. He also went by Tom, so I will be referring to him in this as Tom Brown. And it's one of those things where, like I mentioned, I think we need to start kind of at the beginning and just roll this thing out. There is a ton of information included in this, and I think the majority of it needs to be broke down on the debriefs, but I'm going to give you guys the baseline as usual. So let's kick it off. When all of this is taking place, Tom Brown is a 18-year-old senior at Canadian High School. He was born on September 13th, 1998 in Pampa, Texas, because Pampa is the closest hospital to Canadian after Canadian closed their labor and delivery division down in that hospital. I think they still have a clinic or something there. I'm not exactly sure, but Tom was 4th or 5th generation in that area, so the family was established there, had a lot of stuff and connections going on there. But as I mentioned, he was a senior in high school, and as this story unfolds, it is just before Thanksgiving. So the day before Thanksgiving, it's November 23rd, 2016. All the kids are out for Thanksgiving break. They usually got out on that Wednesday before. I think they get a whole week now. But even like when I was in school, we'd get out, the Wednesday before. So Tom is hanging out on November 23rd, the day before Thanksgiving. He had a pretty normal day from what I understand from listening to interviews with his mom. Her name is Penny Meek. And if you get a chance and you have about 3.5 hours to set aside, Unfound has a podcast, and it is from, I believe, 2018, and it's about a 3-hour interview with Tom's mom, kind of going through the case and breaking it down. And I got a lot of the information I have from that podcast, and also Texas Monthly did a good one called Tom Brown's Body, and they have I think a 6 or 8-parter on that, as well as there's a website called you can find it at https://story maps, and they have a really good kind of breakout of the details in this case as well. So from what I understand about this case, it's a normal day. All the kids are out of school. Some kids are in town that had previously graduated from Canadian and had gone off to college. They are on holiday as well. And so I would think, because I'm from a small town and I'm familiar with kind of the way that a lot of this goes, is when everybody comes back in town, it's a big deal, and old friends can meet back up and everybody can hang out and have a good time. And I think that's probably the buzz that was going on in Canadian at this time, because all the kids were back in town, school was out, everything's good. So we'll pick this up about in the early afternoon. Tom had gone and hung out with some friends, and he had returned home. His mother stated that once he got home, he asked her if she would make him queso as a snack. That was one of his favorite snacks. And he had a snack and took a shower, and then told his mom that he was going to head back out and hang out with friends. So he asked her if he could borrow her debit card so that he could fill up his Dodge Durango. I believe he had a 2009 Dodge Durango, a red one. And so his mom stated that, Penny stated that it was normal for him, when he'd run out of gas, he'd say, "Mom, can I borrow the debit card?" And she'd give him, her debit card, and he would fill it up and return the card. And Tom left the house. He showered, got the card, left the house, told his mom he was going to be hanging out with friends. He had a midnight curfew, so that was already established before this. Penny mentioned that he was very punctual as far as his curfew went. He never broke curfew. And so that was all kind of established already. So Tom takes off, goes. It's about 6 p.m. whenever he leaves the house. And he meets up with his friend Caleb King, and also another gentleman by the name of Michael Castletine. And they hang out for several hours, drive around the town, kind of cruise around. Same thing we used to do in my small town. The town I'm from is a little bit smaller than this, but overall, this is kind of a carbon copy of where I'm from. And they drive around and hang out for a couple hours. Around 8 p.m., Michael Castletine leaves. They go back to this junior high parking lot area, and Michael breaks off of the group, and another person named Christian Webb, which is a female, meets up with Caleb and Tom, and they get into Christian's Dodge Charger, and they end up going and cruising around together. At this time, Caleb and Tom left their vehicles at the junior high parking lot, and they got in with Christian, and they used her vehicle. Now, there's not a lot of information about where they go, because in my opinion, it is driving around, burning gas with no particular place in mind. Just spinning tunes and talking about life and doing things that kids that age normally do, just burning time. It is mentioned that Tom had told the guys that there was a couple songs that he wanted to listen to. One of those you can hear on the Texas Monthly. It's the Avett Brothers, No Hard Feelings, and which is a really good song, by the way. And so they're cruising around, listening to music, talking about life. And around 11 p.m., one of the teenagers says that they went and hung out at the Canadian Wagon Bridge. And the Canadian Wagon Bridge is this old railroad track bridge that goes through at the end of town as you're heading towards the Higgins area, if you want to look that up on a map. So you're heading kind of northeast out of town, and you come across this old bridge, and you can walk across it. And I've stopped and actually walked across it myself a few times, just burning time back when I worked in the oil field. It's really cool. It's a really cool area. I don't know how it would be during the nighttime. Probably a little creepy, but maybe that was part of the whole deal. But anyways, moving forward, at around 11:15 p.m., Christian, Caleb, and Tom, still in Christian's car, go back to the junior high parking lot. They park their vehicles there. They talk for a little bit, and it says that Caleb goes ahead and departs from the group, and Christian and Tom hang back for a few minutes, talk, and then they leave. One of the things that I wanted to bring up in this is that there are two different versions of events depending on where you listen to or what you listen to. There are places that state that all three vehicles can be seen leaving the junior high, and at around this time that I told you, around, in between 11:15 to 11:26, 11:30. But what I think is important is that I believe that on video, you can see what they're saying is that at between that time, you can see all three vehicles leave, but I don't know exactly if it is together. You could have had Caleb, who peeled off first, and then Tom and Christian a few minutes later, or you could be, as they have kind of made it out to be, that they all left at the same time. But either way, they have video of all three vehicles leaving that junior high parking lot. So whether it is the same time or if it's a few minutes apart, I don't think that really matters. I think what does matter in that scenario is that we know that it was all three vehicles leaving the parking lot. Now, around 11:28 p.m., Tom goes up to Frank Oil, which is a unmanned gas station, and he runs his mother's debit card, and he fills his whole vehicle up at that time. Now, there's no information as to if somebody was with Tom, like as in they followed him over there, but from the information that we have from the witnesses that were there, at this point in time, Tom should have been by himself, because Christian and Caleb had already left, and they left in separate vehicles. So at this time specifically, Tom is supposed to be by himself. Remember earlier I mentioned he had the midnight curfew. So as it looks right now, everybody that was hanging out peeled off just before they had their curfew, and Tom went and filled his car up before he went home because, as I stated earlier, they were not in Tom's vehicle. So I figured in this scenario, he was like, oh yeah, I'm on empty, I better go fill up and then head home. Tom's house is not very far from the gas station that he fills up at. This gas station is on the main road that goes through Canadian, so it would be the most heavily traveled in that area. If you were coming through town, passing through Canadian, anything like that, you would travel on this road. You would go right by this unmanned gas station. I've gone by there several times. I've probably even got fuel there before. Now, midnight comes and goes, and Tom does not show up at his house. And as I mentioned earlier, as far as his curfew went, Tom was always on time, or before his curfew. His mother stated that there had been a few instances where Tom had called and said that he was going to miss curfew by a few minutes, but he would be home directly, and his mother said that that was never an issue, that if he needed some extra time, she would give him extra time. But it was very rare that something like that would actually happen because Tom didn't miss curfew. This is one of those things that she states a lot, and I think it's also important in this story because you have someone who is usually very punctual as far as their curfew goes, and then he misses curfew randomly out of nowhere and for seemingly no reason at all. His friends aren't there. The people that he'd been spending the whole entire night with were gone. Now, just before this Thanksgiving holiday, Tom did have a girlfriend, and she was a year older than him. She was already going to college in a different location, and just before all of this Thanksgiving break happened, they broke up. But Tom had already been in contact with her since she had returned home for this holiday, and from what everybody says, there was nothing really there. They had seen each other at a basketball game just before all of this happened, and so it didn't seem like that could have been a possibility for Tom as to why he would have missed his curfew, because Tom's mom had already stated that if Tom wanted to go see his former girlfriend, all he would have had to do was call and ask, and she would have probably given him the okay. But Tom didn't make any phone calls. He didn't send any text messages. He didn't do anything. He just missed curfew. So Tom's mom, Penny, goes into the living area where Tom's brother Tucker is home from school, and one of his friends is over there, and from what I understand, they are playing Xbox together. And Penny asked Tucker if she had heard from Tom, which Tucker replies that he had not. So he said, well, I'll shoot him a text message. So he shoots him a text message, and he doesn't get a reply. So Penny shoots him a text message, Tom's mom, and she does not get a reply. And so she waits a few minutes and says, well, hey, did you get a hold of him? She asked Tucker, did you get a hold of him? He says, no, he didn't respond. She said, okay, well, shoot him another message. Let's see if, maybe he missed it. So Tucker shoots Tom another message. Penny shoots Tom another message, and there's no reply. So Penny waits a little bit longer, thinking, well, maybe he'll show up. Maybe something happened. But if he got into any trouble or if he ran out of gas or what have you, he would have just picked his phone up and called. But he didn't. And after a little bit more time goes by, Tom's mother realizes that the first message that she sent Tom shows that it was delivered. But the second message that she sent Tom shows that it was not delivered. She thought that was a little strange, so she went and asked Tucker, hey, my first message shows it was delivered, my second does not. What does yours show? So he pulls his phone out and he looks and he says, well, mine's the exact same. Yeah, my first message went through, but my second message does not show that it was delivered. So this is when things start to get a little bit worrisome at the household, when they're starting to think to themselves like, there's something not right here, something doesn't feel right. But we also have to realize this is small town America where literally nothing happens. And sometimes I think that can be an issue where we let a lot of time pass, or what may seem like a lot of time, especially in a situation like this, when someone actually turns up missing. Because under normal circumstances, Tom's just going to show up and be like, whoops, there's a first time for everything, and he accidentally blew his curfew. But he doesn't. So Tom's mom tells Tucker, hey, I think we need to go see if we can look for him. Maybe something happened. Maybe he's stuck somewhere, because there was an incident that happened not long before this where Tom had been out on a county road that was a dirt road, and there was a lot of mud or standing water, and his Durango, which I assume because it got stuck, was two-wheel drive, did in fact get stuck, and he had to have someone pull him out. So she thought, well, maybe there's a scenario where Tom was out and he was cruising around and he had some vehicle trouble, or they got stuck, or something happened. But it does not explain why Tom is not answering his phone. And it also does not explain why it looks like Tom's phone is now turned off. And speaking of that, we later found out that the last time Tom's phone sent a ping out to a tower was 12:13 a.m. So not long after Penny and Tucker started texting Tom to see where he was at, his phone is turned off and it is not turned back on. Now, one of the things that is brought up several times in a lot of the different episodes and things that I listen to is that Tom's cell phone pinged off of a tower that put him over by the high school football field, if I'm not mistaken. And I think for a clarification in this episode, we need to bring up the fact that there are only 2 cell phone towers at this time in Canadian Texas. And so when I worked in law enforcement, I know especially back in this time, it was not uncommon to get a ping off of a tower if we were looking for someone, and the estimated radius be up to 300, 500 yards. And so if you're talking about a small town like Canadian, 300 to 500 yards from one area could pretty well place you in any part of the town. So I know that a lot of people hang on the fact that his cell phone did ping over by the football field, but I don't know that we can use that as evidence that Tom was at the football field when his phone last pinged. Because of the estimated search area, I think that really it could be anywhere in town within 300 yards. So, as I mentioned, Penny and Tucker's friend hop in vehicles. Penny's by herself. Tucker and his friend are together, and they go start combing the town. Now, Tucker and his friend, I believe, are driving around town at known areas that Tom usually hangs out. Penny left and immediately went to a property that they had purchased outside of town where they were going to build a home to see if perhaps he had gone out into that area. And then she went over to the location where Tom had got his vehicle stuck previous to this. And then she's kind of started working her way through town. At this time, Penny's husband, who is Tucker and Tom's stepfather, is at the house, at the residence. And there is some information that says he was there at the house snoozing. And there was also some information that says he was at the house waiting in case Tom showed back up. I'm not sure exactly which way that falls, but we do know that there is someone at the house in case Tom does show up, and we have 3 individuals out looking for him. Now, as they're looking for him, they do not come across anything. They do not see Tom's vehicle anywhere. He's nowhere around town, and it is around 2 a.m.-ish, somewhere in there, that Penny decides to call Tom's friends that he was hanging out with. And there are calls made to Caleb and Christian and possibly their parents. There's also calls made to Tom's ex-girlfriend. They ask everybody, hey, Tom didn't make curfew. Do y'all know where he might be? Everybody says no. Caleb and Christian confirm that they had been hanging out with Tom previously, but around that 11:30 mark, we'll just say, that they had all kind of broken off and gone their separate ways and gone home. And at this time, around the 2 a.m. mark, Caleb and Christian had already gone to sleep, and they were at home and in bed. So that kind of takes that portion of it and says, okay, we can kind of close that area off. We already know that Tom is probably not with his ex-girlfriend, so they can kind of close that avenue off. But it's still up in the air as to where Tom could be at this time. So they keep driving around. They keep looking for him. Time keeps going on. Nothing's happening. Nothing's developing. No one has seen Tom's car. And in a town the size of Canadian, it would be very easy to spot a red Dodge Durango. And from what I understand, there were not many Dodge Durangos in that town, and even fewer if Tom might have had the only red Dodge Durango in town. But one thing specific about Tom's car is that he had shoe polish on his windows from homecoming, because Tom played football, and he had, around the homecoming time, he had got his vehicle shoe polished by the cheerleaders, and at this time, that shoe polish was still on the vehicle. Now, Tom had quit the football team before this, and that's a story for another time as we're kind of unfolding and kind of unpacking these details in the debrief. But that shoe polish was still on his vehicle at the time he went missing. So you have this red Durango, and it is if it's not the only red Durango in town, it is for sure the only red Durango in town that has the shoe polish on it. So it would be easy to spot this vehicle if you are searching for it. But no one in the town, no one that's looking for Tom, ever even sees the vehicle. It has disappeared. It is gone. So around the 3 a.m., 3:30 mark, Penny's going to go ahead and say, hey, it's time to call the sheriff's department. Now, because of the size of this town, they do not have a police department. They only operate with the county sheriff's department as their quote-unquote local law enforcement. So if you have an issue that comes up in the city limits or in the county, it's all going to be under the Hemphill County Sheriff's Office. This is also the same as the town that I grew up in. We only had a sheriff's office. We did not have a police department. Penny calls the non-emergency line and says that her son has not come home and she would like to have a deputy come out. At this time, her son Tucker and his friend return. Somewhere in here, I believe Tucker's friend is going to kind of peel off and go his separate way. I'm not sure exactly on the time frame in there, but Penny returns back to the house, and it's stated that there's about 45 minutes that goes by from the time that she called the sheriff's office to the time that the deputy showed up at her house to assist with Tom's disappearance. Once the deputy shows up to Tom's house, Penny kind of gives the deputy the rundown, says this is where we've been at, this is what we've done. I believe the deputy asks where Tom's ex-girlfriend lives at, and Tucker says she lives out of town. I can't tell you the address, but I can tell you how to get there. If you let me ride with you, I can show you exactly where it is. Because at this point in time, no one had actually gone out to her house. So the deputy, which I believe his name was Pine Gregory, and Tucker jump in his patrol car, his Tahoe, and they take off and they start looking for Tom. They drive out to his ex-girlfriend's house. They do make contact with her, and they are able to close that avenue off, saying that Tom is not out there and that he is not with his ex-girlfriend. So you kind of closed out all the friends. You closed out the ex-girlfriend. Now there's really no possibility they have no further leads on who Tom could possibly be with, because all those avenues that he would normally travel are closed. He's not with any of the people that he normally hangs out with. At this time, Penny goes back out and starts looking for Tom. Tucker is with the deputy, and they cruise around until almost 6 o'clock in the morning and finally decide to call it. I believe that the deputy says that he needs to go and get ready for his shift or something like that. And I think it's also important to point out that sometimes these smaller towns, smaller areas, they may have a deputy, a single, or maybe a split shift type situation. And a lot of times, if the county is covered all night, it might only be by one person, or they might have like a split shift where someone stays on all night and then the last deputy goes off at midnight, or something like that. But Pine Gregory says that he needs to get ready for his shift, and so they kind of part ways there, and that's kind of where the search part kind of ends with the deputy and Tucker and Penny. Now, after a little bit of time goes by in the morning, the word has kind of gotten out that Tom is still missing. And so at this time, Tom's friend Christian that he was with before that, but the night that he went missing, she tells her dad what's going on, and her dad happens to own a helicopter, and so they have some sort of helicopter service, but she asks her dad says, let's fire up the helicopter and let's go see if we can find Tom. You still have the family and friends searching for Tom, but now we get to add in the helicopter. So the helicopter goes up in the air. They fly around the town. They fly out to an area about 14 miles outside of town called Lake Marvin, and they kind of look over the lake area. They kind of fly the river area. They go back over to that bridge area that I was talking about, and as they're coming back into town, on the outskirts, over by these baseball fields, there's a water treatment facility. And as they're flying over this water treatment facility, there is an area that has some trees in this water treatment facility. And as they're flying over this grouping of trees, they think they see something. So they get a better angle, and they look, and lo and behold, there's Tom's Dodge Durango parked underneath those trees. They call the sheriff's department and say, hey, we think we found Tom's car. It's over in this area. You need to go check it out. The police show up, and the sheriff's office, So he calls the sheriff's office, says, hey, we found the vehicle. I think we need to go check it out. So they go and check it out, and when they get there, sure enough, there's Tom's Durango right there underneath those trees. Now, when they make contact with that vehicle, Tom is not in it. His cell phone is not in the car. His backpack is not in the car, and his keys are not in the car. It is also stated that the driver's side window of the vehicle was down, and the only significant things they found in the initial search was there was one small droplet of blood that was found on the driver's side door, and there was a shell casing found inside the vehicle, a .25 caliber shell casing. Now, Tom's family nor any of his friends stated that they owned a .25 auto, and we have talked about those guns previously in this podcast. They're kind of a rare gun to have, and so I do know that, and I will tell you this, the droplet of blood that was found in the vehicle on the door did come back to Tom later on down the road. There was also a debit card found in the vehicle that belonged to Michael Castletine, which was his friend that was in the vehicle earlier in the day, which if you speak to Peggy about this, which she brought up in an interview, it was kind of common for Michael to lose his debit card or drop it. And so this didn't feel like it had any significance to it when they found it, because after they talked to Tom's mom, she said that's happened several times before. But the droplet of blood and the .25 caliber shell casing that was found are definitely significant to this. Also, very strange that his phone, his backpack, and his keys were not in the vehicle along with himself. So all these things kind of lead to more questions, more mystery about this whole disappearance. And that is literally all that they are left with when this case kind of starts to unfold. They don't have any information. They don't know what this droplet of blood means. They don't know where this .25 auto shell casing came from. There's no other ballistic evidence that's found in the vehicle. And by that, I mean there's no other shell casings. There's no weapon found. There's no bullet holes in the vehicle. It's one of those things where it's just this shell casing, just this one drop of blood. That's all. And after this, ladies and gentlemen, the case just kind of drops off. There's not much evidence to be found, and it's even more weird that same day, The sheriff's department obviously took the vehicle and impounded the vehicle. The strange thing is that later on that day, I believe they said around 4 or 5 p.m., the sheriff's office released the vehicle back to Tom's family. They had it on a record because they only had one set of keys for it, and they had it dropped off right at his house. Now, later on, the sheriff at the time, Nathan Lewis, would state that that night he didn't sleep very well, thinking that there could have been something that they missed. So the next morning, they went back and towed the vehicle back to the sheriff's office again, searched it for more evidence, and then later on down the road, the vehicle was released again, and in that secondary search, there was no additional information or evidence that was located that could help them in the case. So this is where we're at in as far as the evidence goes that we have at this point in time, and the case just kind of drops off and goes nowhere. There's a lot of theories and hearsay and rumors and things buzzing around town because this is a small town. I came from a town where everybody knew your business before you did. In some ways, as I get older, I think not such a bad thing, but definitely when you're younger, it seems like a huge pain because it feels like everybody is in your business. However, a couple of months after Tom disappeared, his backpack was located. His backpack that was in the vehicle at the time that he disappeared. Inside that backpack was his laptop computer that was issued to him by the school. So when this backpack is found, they're thinking they might get some information. There might be something there. And it was found about 4 miles from where his car was located, back out on this road that leads out to Lake Marvin. Now, where this road goes, there is like a tee-off or a split-off, and the backpack was found behind the fence, placed behind some trees, and it was found by an oil field worker. And as far as I know, there's nothing about the finding of that backpack that led law enforcement to believe that the person that found it was involved with Tom's disappearance. However, what the sheriff's office did say about the backpack is it did look like it had been sitting in that field for some time. And what they say is that there was an indentation in the ground where the backpack had been sitting, and also the contents inside the backpack were wet and molded. So it makes it look like that backpack had probably been sitting there since Tom disappeared or just after he disappeared. But it was not dumped just before it was found. So because the backpack had been sitting outside and it had been left in the elements because of because of the contents inside being wet and molded, they were not able to use the laptop to find any information off of it, and they were not able to get any additional evidence from the backpack based off the condition that it was left in. That's all with the backpack. And then about 10 months after the backpack is found, down the road from where the backpack was located towards Lake Marvin, they find what they say is Tom's cell phone. Now, I want to briefly touch on this because it's very interesting the way that they found this cell phone. Tom's mom had contacted a private investigation company, Klein Private Investigators, to help her out with this case because she did not feel like she was getting the help that she needed from the local sheriff's office, which we will also dive into that in the debrief. But what happens is that Klein Investigation Services is going to, they have already scheduled a search party for this area of Lake Marvin Road. And the only people that knew about it, according to the investigators, were them and the sheriff's office. So they set up in this area down from where the backpack was found, and I don't mean like 100 yards down the road, I mean miles down the road. And how this specific location was picked, I'm not sure, but they get a search party together, they all meet out there. Within 10 minutes, folks, 10 minutes of this search party starting to look for evidence, a lady comes across a cell phone in the bar ditch. And when she spots it, she says, "Hey, I got something over here." They go over to look at it. The investigation company had already told everybody, if you find something, just yell at us. Don't touch it. Don't take pictures of it. Don't do anything. Just let us know. So they find the cell phone. And when they alert law enforcement comes out and picks it up. Now, law enforcement states that they recovered a gold iPhone. The person who found the phone says that it was more like a rose gold iPhone. But the interesting thing about the iPhone, regardless of what color it was, is that it was in mint condition. It was in perfect condition. It was not like the backpack. It was not weathered. It was not damaged. They stated that several weeks or several days before this search had gone underway, that the bar ditches along Lake Marvin Road had been mowed. And so you would think that the phone would either be weathered or it would be damaged in some way, but it was not. Now, later they said that the phone that they found was in fact Tom's, but any information that they found from that phone has not been released to the public. So I can't give you any information about what was actually found on the phone, but I can tell you that they did find Tom's phone one way or the other. And there's a lot of things that I think kind of go into that. A lot of details that I think in this particular situation that are very, very sketchy, and there's really no answer for any of them. There's no one that says, "Oh, well, maybe it got left under a bag or something." Well, no, but some lady found it just literally sitting in the bar ditch, literally just sitting on the side of the road in this area that they decided to search 10 minutes after the search began. It's really, really, really strange. If we move on from this, and I think it's also important as far as geographically, that phone was about 9 miles from where Tom's car was. So 4 miles for the backpack, 9 miles. So the backpack and the phone were 5 miles away from each other on the same road. So we didn't get any evidence from either of these two things, and time marches on. So now we're going to fast forward to over 2 years since Tom had gone missing, and there has been 0 new evidence and 0 breakthroughs. Now, there's a lot going on in between these 2 years, but that is information that I will cover in the debrief, because I've got pages of notes of things that I've written down, questions that I have. But over 2 years later, now we're fast forwarding to January 9th, 2019, okay? And it states that a man walking down a path near Lake Marvin Road in this area that has probably already been searched. I know that listening to interviews, it is stated that this area had been searched multiple times, but on a path near Lake Marvin Road, it states a man walking noticed something and called the police. Now, the thing that does not say in here is that that person was a Hemphill County Sheriff's deputy. That person was also Pine Gregory, the same person that came to help out whenever Tom went missing. And what he found he said he looked like he found a skull. And what was he doing out there? Well, apparently he was on duty. He was out on Lake Marvin Road. He was out near the lake. He was just walking around, supposedly, looking for buck sheds, which would be the horns, the buck horns that break off or fall off. And so he said that he likes to collect these things, and so he knows this is an area where there is a lot of buck activity. And so he is walking through this area looking for sheds, and voila, he comes across the remains of a human being. Now, it would take some time for them to figure out who this is, but later on, it is confirmed that that is the body of Tom Brown. So, what evidence did we find whenever they found the body? Guess what? Nothing. Not a thing. There's no evidence that Tom was, say, shot in the head, as most people would speculate because of the .25 auto. There's no evidence of anything because the body is decomposed fully. I do believe they found a good portion of the remains, but not all. But as far as any other evidence goes, there is nothing. And so that is where the evidence dries up again. The trail goes cold. Nothing's there. Now, there's a lot of different theories that go around in this town. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of rumors. You know, some people saying that Tom ran away from home, whether it be with a person or by himself. There's speculation that drug dealers killed him, that he was kidnapped, that he had some sort of dealings with people and it caused his death. But the weird thing is that there's no evidence one way or the other to say that one of these things is true or not. And I want to get into some of these theories on the debrief, but in my opinion, you have four main possibilities that can go on in this case. There's speculation that Tom committed suicide and that he did not want his body to be found, so he drove out to a remote location. But first, he ditched his vehicle 14 miles away from where his body was found and walked over there, which, if you talk to his mother, she said he is not much of an outdoorsman. This is during the winter time. It was confirmed to be cold that night, and I think that saying that Tom parking his vehicle over by the water treatment plant and then walking 14 miles out to this area where his body was found is a little bit outside of the scope of what I believe happened to him. Also, the gun that he would have supposedly had to use was not found, and also that does not explain how the .25 caliber shell casing was found in his vehicle. Possibility number 2 is that he could have been killed by one of his friends, but as I mentioned, I've got a lot of things written down about that as well, theories that I kind of have, things that I want to go through. Theory number 3 would be that his family was involved, and you can kind of tie in his family with the suicide if you wanted to, that Tom committed suicide and his family was embarrassed about that, and so they helped cover it up. But once again, you don't really have a whole lot to get you there, and I'll go through all that. I think it's important to point out the reason that you could tie the family and the suicide together is because Penny's father, years before all of this took place, had committed suicide, and so everybody kind of seemed to, not everybody, but a lot of people kind of seemed to jump to that in the beginning. Well, since this, then that. And like I said, I don't know if you can get there based off the evidence that you have. And then theory number 4 would be that law enforcement is involved in some way or another. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of things that the sheriff's office did that were a little sketchy in my opinion. Kind of some evidence or lack of evidence logs, the activity of the sheriff's office, the fact that a sheriff's office employee is the one who found the body all those years later, and it was just in a very suspicious and strange way. Does that mean that something nefarious there happened? Nah, I mean, you can't really say that at this point in time. But like I said, I will go over all of this with Mike. I've got pages of notes. I've got questions that I want to ask. I want to talk about things that we think could have happened. I think it's important to point out that there are 4. I mentioned the 4 key theories. I also think that there are 4 key pieces of evidence in this. You have the Durango, the backpack, the cell phone, and then Tom Brown himself. These are 4 key pieces of evidence that were found in 4 different locations at 4 different times. And so I think that really goes into a lot of the speculation that a lot of people have and how we can kind of put some credit to or debunk some theories that some people might have, or the theories that I've heard in general. But that is something that I really want to dive into with Mike in the debrief, and you guys know that's kind of what we do here. And I wanted to give you guys the bare bones of this. Trust me, there is tons more information on this, but I wanted to give you the kind of the backstory of how everything went down, and then we will break this thing down piece by piece in the debrief. There's probably going to be at least 2 episodes for the debrief, a part 2 and then a part 3. And then if I can get a hold of Tom's mom, which I've had contact with her, and she has agreed to speak to Mike and I about this case. And if we can get that locked up while we're in the process of recording these, I'm going to go ahead and probably do another episode detailing the conversations that we had while we were in Canadian, if we can get that through. So I think I'm going to leave it there for this episode. It was so good to be back. It's so good to be back talking to you guys, and we wanted to come back with a really solid case, and we really put our research time into this one, and the debrief episodes are going to be good because Mike and I have already spent several hours talking about this case amongst each other, and we're ready to bring it to you guys. So make sure and be looking for the debrief episodes. They'll be coming out after this episode, and I look forward to talking to you guys when we do those. We'll see you next time. Goodbye. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Murder Project. Our numbers are going up, our downloads are going up, and we have you guys to thank for that. If you're looking for us on any of the social media platforms, you can find us on Facebook at The Murder Project. If you need to search for us, we are at facebook.com/podcasttmp. If you're looking for us on Instagram, we are at The Murder Project. And if you're looking for us on Twitter, we are at The Murder Pod. Also, don't forget, go on to any of those platforms that you might be listening to, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcast, hit that subscribe button. Leave us a review if you can, please, and hit that 5 stars, man. To those of you that have done that recently, thank you so much. Those numbers are going up as well, and we appreciate it. If you have a longer form question or comment, we have an email address, and that is contact@themurderproject.com. Once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. We'll see you guys on the next episode of The Debrief. But before I go, everyone, please remember, head up, eyes up, and stay alive.